So maybe you've seen some pictures of the White House recently, and you're kind of wondering, why are there cranes, piles of debris, and what looks like massive chunks of the building missing? Well, let's get into it and explain what's really going on at one of the most famous addresses in the world.
I mean, it's a pretty striking image, isn't it? Demolition crews at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You don't see that every day. So the big question is, what on earth is happening to the East Wing? On Monday, construction crews started tearing down these massive chunks of the East Wing's covered entryway and its windows. And just to be clear, this isn't some minor touch-up. Nope, this is a major overhaul. So what's the reason for all this commotion? Well, it's all part of President Trump's plan to build a brand new grand presidential ballroom. He actually announced the whole project on social media, describing it as much needed.
So the official reasoning for this isn't being framed as just a personal preference. It's being presented as fulfilling this long-held presidential dream, a desire that apparently stretches back more than a century.
Okay, so fulfilling that dream, well, it comes with a pretty hefty price tag. We're talking $250 million. That's the estimated cost for this new ballroom addition.
All right, so where's that $250 million coming from? The official word is that the project is being privately funded by, and these are the president's words, many generous patriots. But as of right now, the White House hasn't actually released the names of any of these donors.
And this is where things get interesting. It's where the official claims start to bump up against a very different reality on the ground. Let's take a closer look at the contrast between what was promised and what's actually happening.
So, back in July, the president gave this assurance. He really emphasized that the new structure would be separate and would pay total respect to the existing building. He was super clear, not touching it.
So let's just break this down, right? The claim was completely separate, but the demolition is happening on a wing that is very much attached to the main structure. The promise was not touching it, but we are literally seeing the demolition of the entryway. And while the plan was to pay total respect, photos clearly show gutted sections of this historic wing. Now, to be fair, the White House has been modified before. This isn't the first time. So to really get the significance of this project, you need a little historical context. Let's look at the timeline for this part of the building.
Okay, so the East Wing itself was first built way back in 1902 under Theodore Roosevelt, mainly to be a formal entrance for guests. The last time it was significantly changed was in 1942. That's when a bomb shelter was built underneath it during World War II. So that makes this the biggest structural change to this part of the White House in over 80 years.
It's also important to point out that this is within the president's authority. Even though the National Park Service administers the White House as a national monument, the sitting president does have broad powers to make renovations. But just because it's allowed, well, that doesn't mean it's happening without some serious concerns. Historical experts are now raising questions, and they're mostly centered around this issue of transparency.
Robert K. Sutton, who's the former chief historian for the National Park Service, he's pointed out a few key issues. For one, there are no public details on the new ballroom's size or design. And it's also really unclear if the established guidelines for historical preservation are even being followed. And that really matters, because those guidelines exist to protect the building's history and make sure any changes are documented for the future. And this quote from Sutton, wow, it really captures the whole situation. He's pointing out that for what is arguably the most significant executive building on the entire planet, the public's being kept completely in the dark about major changes that could permanently alter this historic landmark.
You know, when you boil it all down, this whole debate comes down to a fundamental question about the White House itself and what it represents, not just to the president, but to all of us, to the entire country.
As Sutton reminds us, the White House has had this nickname for a long time, the People's House. It's this idea that the building belongs in spirit to the public. And that idea, well, it's at the very heart of this controversy. So we're left with this question. When a president wants to make a permanent $250 million change to a historic landmark, who really gets the final say on the future of the People's House? It's definitely something worth thinking about.